What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 2, Thursday Night Football.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
Okay, in this video, I'm going to give you my top picks for the Thursday Night Football Showdown between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Minnesota Vikings. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, let's take a look at this Thursday Night Football Showdown between the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles. So at the quarterback position for the Eagles, the stud on the slate is Jalen Hurts. And playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Now, Jalen Hurts didn't have a great week 1, only scored 13.5 fantasy points, but he did get 9 rush attempts. He's going to be about 70% owned here tonight, and he's projected at 23.9 fantasy points. He's 11,400 DraftKings salary. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Eagles favored by 7. So good matchup here, nice bounce back game. So I like Jalen Hurts here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now for the Minnesota Vikings, if you want to save some salary at quarterback, I like Kirk Cousins. And playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the 5th worst defense overall, give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins averaging 22.5 fantasy points per game on the season. And he got 3 rush attempts in week 1. So he's going to be about 51% owned, projected at 17.4 fantasy points here tonight. He's 9,200 DraftKings salary, so you can save quite a bit of salary if you want to go with Kirk Cousins over Jalen Hurts. He's in a good matchup, and it could be a passing game script as the Vikings fall behind in this one. Got plenty of weapons, so I like Kirk Cousins here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So for the Vikings, you got Alexander Mattison playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Alexander Mattison averaging 13.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 11 rushes per game and 4 pass targets per game. Going to be about 29% owned, was on the field for 73% of the snaps in week 1. I almost said percent of the slaps, 73% of the slaps. Okay, so he's projected at 12.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's 7,600 DraftKings salary. So I do think he's a good play here. Didn't have a great week 1. I think he can get more volume. He's on the field a ton. It's going to be about 29% owned. And he does get some pass targets out the backfield, so I like Alexander Mattison here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, for the Eagles, not really much to go by. They didn't have a lot of touches for their running backs in week 1. So the guy that I like out of all of them is DeAndre Swift. And he only scored 1 fantasy point in week 1 off of 2 pass targets and 1 rush attempt. But he was the touch leader for the Philadelphia backfield, and he's going to be about 19% owned. Now, he's only on the field for 29% of the snaps, so keep in mind, probably only going to get a handful of touches. But he is projected at 10.3 fantasy points here tonight, which is kind of high because he's only 4,000 DraftKings salary. So I think this is a good value play. I think he is going to get a handful of touches here, and I think he's going to score 5 to 15 fantasy points. So for 4,000 DraftKings salary, I think that's good value. So I like DeAndre Swift here versus the Minnesota Vikings.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So lots of good stuff at the wide receiver position. This is where you're going to want to save your salary so you can stack these wide receivers. So you got a stud pick here, Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the 5th worst defense overall and also give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Justin Jefferson averaging 27 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 57% owned. Was on the field for 98% of the snaps in week 1. Projected at 19.6 fantasy points here tonight. And he's $12,400 DraftKings salary, so it looks like he's the most expensive player on the slate. But he is in a good spot here with Vegas, thinking there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, and the Vikings trailing by 7. This could be a good stack with Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. Save a little money on Kirk Cousins. So I like Justin Jefferson here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, now the stud on the slate for the Eagles is A.J. Brown, and he's averaging 14.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10 pass targets per game. Going to be about 47% owned, was on the field for 91% of the snaps, projected at 17.1 fantasy points here in week 2. He's $10,600 DraftKings salary. So I like A.J. Brown here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Another stud for the Eagles, Devonta Smith. And so the Minnesota Vikings give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So good matchup on both sides of the ball here at the wide receiver position. Devonta Smith has averaged 17.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 39% owned, was on the field for 98% of the snaps in week 1, projected at 14.8 fantasy points here tonight. He's $9,000 DraftKings salary. So I also like Devonta Smith here versus the Minnesota Vikings. So guys, those are the studs on the slate at wide receiver position. Of course, you can't play them all. I think I'm going to opt to play either the Justin Jefferson stack or maybe a Devonta Smith lineup. Probably have an A.J. Brown lineup as well, because those 3 wide receivers, don't want to fade those guys. But coming down in salary here, if you want to get some value, there's a couple of options. You could go with Jordan Addison from the Minnesota Vikings. And Jordan Addison averaging 16.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6 pass targets per game. Going to be about 23% owned. Now, he was on the field for 56% of the snaps, projected at 10.2 fantasy points here tonight. He's $6,400 DraftKings salary. So he got a decent amount of targets and had some good production in week 1. So I like Jordan Addison here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And probably even over Jordan Addison, I like KJ Osborne from the Minnesota Vikings. Now, he only scored 6.1 fantasy points in week 1, but he did get 6 pass targets. Going to be about 20% owned, but I like this play because he was on the field for 91% of the snaps, so he was out there far more than Jordan Addison. They both got the same amount of pass targets, but Jordan Addison scored the fantasy points. But KJ Osborne should have more opportunity in theory if that snap count holds true through week 2. So he's projected at 7.7 fantasy points here tonight, and he's only $5,000 DraftKings salary, so I do think this is the value play at wide receiver. But of course, Jordan Addison, both of these guys, it's a coin flip. So I like KJ Osborne here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Now, if you want to go for a dart throw and save a ton of salary here, you could go with a guy like Quez Watkins from the Philadelphia Eagles. And he scored 3.7 fantasy points in week 1 off of 2 pass targets, but he was on the field for 79% of the snaps, so that's pretty important. Going to be about 15% owned, but he's only 3,000 DraftKings salary, so good dart throw here if you want to go high risk, high reward. You could throw in Quez Watkins, hope that he finds the end zone, or even at 3,000 DraftKings salary, doesn't need much, just a couple of targets and some catches. So I like Quez Watkins as a dart throw sleeper pick here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, moving on to the tight end position here. I like TJ Hawkinson, the stud on the slate from the Minnesota Vikings, playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the 5th worst defense overall. And they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So TJ Hawkinson, he's averaging 11.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9 pass targets per game, going to be about 34% owned. He's on the field for 75% of the snaps in week 1, projected at 11.4 fantasy points here tonight. He's 6,800 DraftKings salary, so fantastic matchup, tons of volume. So I like TJ Hawkinson here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if you do want a dart throw tight end, take a look at Josh Oliver from the Minnesota Vikings. He scored 6.2 fantasy points in week 1 off of 3 pass targets, was on the field for 47% of the snaps, going to be about 7% owned. Now he's only 800 DraftKings salary, so I definitely think he's the lowest salary player with the biggest opportunity in terms of his involvement in week 1. So 800 DK salary, doesn't need much. If he gets 3 pass targets again here in week 2, I'd take that all day long. So I like Josh Oliver. And it's like a fade. If TJ Hawkinson doesn't do well, a lot of people are going to be on TJ Hawkinson. Maybe he gets injured. Josh Oliver comes in. Did I just manifest this destiny? We'll find out. But outside of that, if you want to look at another tight end, take a look at Dallas Goedert from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Vikings have been pretty good defending opposing tight ends. And Dallas Goedert didn't score any fantasy points in week 1. Did get 1 pass target. He's going to be about 36% owned. So he was on the field for 92% of the snaps. So look for a big bounce back game here from Dallas Goedert. So I think he's a good play as well.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.